Good morning. Welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. It is Thursday morning, and we are taking a look at chapter 5 of Genesis. Now, I have to admit, when I have read chapter 5, it's one of those ones that it's like blah, 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 blah. Just a whole bunch of names that don't mean a lot to me. But when we look at it a little bit differently, we can find a lot of good stuff in here. But, it kind of takes somebody who's read through it before. Otherwise, it just looks like names. But we can find some really good things inside this chapter 5. And so what we discover is that, again, we are reminded that God created humankind and God made them in the likeness of God. So when Adam was created, we know that God created in God's likeness. But it shows that through Adam's recreating, he's still producing God's likeness. Therefore, we can recognize that each one of us also carries the likeness of God. And I think it's really important for us to also remember that if all humans carry the likeness of God, it doesn't matter if you're male, if you're female, if you're what color your skin is. All of our variety actually is about the likeness of God. And so it just reminds us that there are some parts of but what makes us sinful then is our brokenness, like Adam, to rebel. And so within each and every one of us, we have this likeness to God, but we also have this rebellion in us that's like Adam. And so there's this kind of this play out in who we are. And we see that through the actions of the generations, which we experience here. And so another thing that can be kind of confusing when reading chapter 5 is we hear the ages of so many of these sons, so to speak. Like Adam lived 130 years, and he became the father of a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he became the father of Seth were 800. And he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years. And he died. So we have these huge long years that people are living. And we have to remember first that the Hebrew people were storytellers. And there was this belief that the early ancestors lived longer lives until after the flood, and then God shortened the lifespans of the people. But we also need to remember that the calendar as we know it, the way we mark our lives and our years, we actually live by what's called the Gregorian calendar, which was created in 1582 AD, after Christ. 1582 is the Gregorian. And before that, we use the Julius Caesar's calendar, the Roman calendar, and we use that for a few. And then there were Sumerian calendars, Chinese calendars, Egyptian calendars. I mean, everybody was using their own time source. So I think we need to take this with a grain of salt. Of yes, they might have had these long lives, but they were also counting their lives in different numbers and things. And so it's kind of to be aware of that, we just have to put it in perspective, so to speak, of what we're looking at here. Now, what's also interesting in this is that we're seeing a theme after each person's life. They're explained in a few verses. It says, and he died, and he died, and he died. And it's this recognition that there's now this sense of there's not immortality, and there's this ending to life that is now part of the world. And so recognizing that things come to an end. However, there's this person Verse 21, if you want to find it, in Genesis chapter 5, it says, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him. So all of a sudden, Enoch does not die. He is just taken up. And so we begin to see this sense of those who live righteous lives, those who are with God their whole lives, have a sense of eternal life. Now, it's not the way we understand it with Jesus yet, but we can start to see where this is coming from, is this sense that when we've lived our lives walking with God our whole life, we don't really die. There's something eternal that stays. And so we see that right here with Enoch, because it does not say he dies. However, though, we get right back to his son, and again, we get back into the habit of here's his life, and then he dies. Then we have another one here at the very end in the line, and it's Lamech. And he becomes the father of Noah. And so Noah starts off chapter 6, getting into Noah's story. But what Lamech does is he kind of gives a blessing to his son. And he says, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the toil of our hands. And so what we see is that Lamech has now put a hope into Noah, what Noah's going to be able to do. And what we find out then is that after being 500 years old, Noah becomes a father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so we'll see more about them in coming chapters. But just as like in Cain, so in Cain's family, when we kind of got towards the end of his genealogy, we have Lamech, who then talks about the curse that continues with his family. And now we have another Lamech in 28 of Seth's genealogy, and we get a blessing. And so we've got to continue to see that within our Bible, within all of this, it goes to show how humanity has all of this ability to live in God's grace, but it also has this ability to experience the evil of the world. And how do we bless our children? That's what I think about. Do we bless them or do we curse them? Do we raise them as if they are living into God's healers? Are they part of God's goodness? Or do we see them and we immediately think them as a burden, as a curse in this world? Like how we raise our children produces them into what they help become. Yes, they have the right to rebel against that, of course, but they also have the ability to live into the blessing we put upon them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow this blessing and where it goes in the future. And so just as a reminder, do you wake up each morning offering a blessing to the day or a curse to the day? Because it can mark your path. And I hope this gives you something to think about, that each morning maybe you wake up with a blessing and you see all that is good and what God's goodness is doing in your life. I mean, it is the month of Thanksgiving, so be thankful every morning and live into that instead of the curses. And so I hope that gives you some hope, joy, and some faith this morning. We will come back tomorrow with chapter 6. And thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.